everyone, I'm Rebecca and welcome back to my sewing room. Today I am going to be continuing on with the 1890s summer dress project that I've been working on for the last couple of vlog videos. If you have not yet seen those videos, I will link that playlist right up above and also down below in the description. So far I have made the skirt entirely, which I've actually even hemmed at this point, and I have also mocked up the bodice. And so today we are going to continue working on that bodice, hopefully getting a lot of progress done this week. Fingers crossed, we shall see. I mean, really the bodice fitting, I feel like, other than the finishing of the bodice, I feel like the fitting is the hardest part of any process. So luckily we have already achieved that. Now we get to move on to actually cutting out the actual fabric. Yay! And in my last video, I did mention that I was planning on doing the base layer, that inner layer of the bodice, out of either cotton sateen or cotton twill. I did look through my stash. I have both of those, but what I decided was I really wanted something in between those weights. My cotton sateen is really quite thin and cotton twill just feels quite heavy for a summer bodice. But I actually have some Kona cotton in my stash, and I feel like even though it doesn't have the sheen that like polished cotton would have in historical bodices, Kona cotton is kind of the most similar in weight to that polished cotton. So I've decided to go with the Kona cotton for the structure, and then it'll be that Swiss dot semi-sheer fabric as the outer fabric for the bodice. So we're gonna start by cutting out all of the pieces that we did in the mock-up of the last one, other than that back overlay piece. All of the structural pieces are gonna get cut out of that Kona cotton. I'm gonna cut out that back piece out of the Swiss dot cotton, and then I'm gonna turn my attention to the placket once I make up all of the rest of those pieces. So one thing that I have actually already done, besides ripping apart everything that I had in the mock-up, was I took the back piece, which was the overlay back piece, and I marked all of the darts, all of those areas that are going to be stitched down. I marked those all in friction pen. However, what I need to do is make sure that they match up from one side to the other. Then I'm going to mark them in actual pen because that way I can use this as my pattern and it won't go away. I have mentioned this in other videos, but when you are doing a mock-up, you never want to just like go back to the paper pattern as your base. Highly, highly recommend using the actual mock-up as your pattern. Now, that said, you do want to transfer all of your markings from the mock-up to the paper pattern or create new paper patterns if they don't fit within those original paper patterns. That way you have them for later. But always save the mock-up too, because fabric just acts differently than paper. And that way if you do go to make this bodice again too, you already have a mock-up. You can just seam this together, see if there's any tweaks you need to make. So fabric mock-ups and fabric patterns are your friend. Before we go ahead and dive into the actual sewing part of this video though, I do want to say that this video is kindly sponsored by Skillshare. So let's go over to sponsor Rebecca for a little bit about Skillshare. Thank you, Sewing Rebecca. Sponsor Rebecca here. I've talked about Skillshare a couple of times on this channel, but if you haven't yet heard of them, Skillshare is an online learning community for creative and curious people. On Skillshare, you can find thousands of inspiring classes on topics ranging from basic sewing skills to self-care, and from web design to productivity and so many more. I'm currently taking a class on photography for Instagram, taught by Hannah Argyle. I've been feeling a little bit stuck with my Instagram lately, and I really want to try to up my self-photography game. And in her class, I'm learning more about camera settings, composition, editing, and so much more. Hopefully you'll be able to see some improvements in my self-shot photos soon. One of the many nice things about Skillshare is that the classes are really meant for your schedule. Many of the classes are under an hour, and you can pause, rewind, or rewatch classes as often as you like. And the great news is that the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link down in the description below will get a free 1-month trial of Skillshare Premium membership so that you can explore your creativity and unlock your limitless creative potential. And now, back to Sewing Rebecca. Thank you so much, sponsor Rebecca. Now we can go ahead and get cutting. So I was happily going and cutting into all of my fabric. I got all of the lining pieces cut out of the Kona cotton, and I was cutting into the Swiss dot fabrics for the fronts and for that back that's gonna get all pleated, when it dawned on me, this is sheer. How am I going to hide the closures and overlap of the plastron in the front? Yeah. So I then took a little bit of a time to experiment and play around with potential double linings, like basically a lining for the outer fabric piece, because the thing is that the fronts are treated separately and then they're just joined together like at the seams and stuff. So it's not like I'm flat lining them. It is actually being darted separately and finished separately and all of that. And that's because of the way that it closes. So basically what that means is, like right here, I would see the darts through the sheer, same with here. I would see potentially the overlap of the plastron right here, or underlap, I guess, of the plastron right here where it closes, maybe even the closures, and all of that would look really, really ugly. So I have decided that I am going to line those sections with lightweight muslin. That way, hopefully it won't give too much weight to those sections. I still want it to be really kind of light and floaty looking, and also not too warm. So I'm gonna line those with muslin. However, I was playing around with the back with those sort of arch fan out of pleats in the center back and seeing what that would look like lined, and I don't like the look of it lined. I actually much prefer seeing those sort of darts because I feel like the darts there are really adding to the structural effect. So hopefully I won't change my mind, but I am going to go ahead and proceed with that being unlined, as in just having the flat lining piece, and then the fronts having the extra addition of the muslin in there, and hopefully that will work. And it also makes me think of like, okay, what fabrics do I want for the sleeves? Because I definitely don't want like a sheer sleeve, so that's gonna be lined. So I think the sleeves are gonna be lined with either muslin or maybe sateen, because I think my sateen is slightly heavier weight than my muslin, and I don't want like the Kona cotton in the sleeve underneath. I think that would be too much. So I'm thinking sateen, and then the Swiss dot, and then the big Swiss dot ruffles up here. But we haven't even gotten to the sleeves yet because we haven't assembled the bodice. So anyway, I now have all of the bodice pieces cut out, including those muslin pieces, and I can start assembling them. So the first thing is going to be serging the outsides of all of the Kona cotton pieces and putting together the back pieces, the center back, the center side backs, and then the side backs, assembling all of those. Once I have that assembled, then I can take my Swiss dot back piece, which covers all of those, and pleat that up and put it on there. I think what I'm gonna do, I don't know for certain yet, but I think what I'm going to do is sew those darts, the fan darts, through the Kona cotton base. So basically like do it like I did on the mock-up where I pin all around all of the sides, make sure all of that matches up, then do my pleats, which I have marked out, and actually it was quite nice and easy to mark them out because I could see the lines through on my mock-up. So I marked out all of those pleats, making sure that they are now even on both sides, but I think pleating them up and actually stitching through to have a solid base of the Kona cotton, that is going to be the way to go. We're gonna give it a try. It's also gonna be just a pain in the butt to do such tiny pleats over this Swiss dot. So I hope I don't hate myself. If I hate it, I can always do it by hand, but I'd really rather not because, you know, I wanna get this done like today. That'd be great. So I have a lot of work ahead of me. I am going to go start sewing. So it's been a little bit since I last checked in with a progress update, just because pretty much everything that I've been doing has been stuff that I did on the mock-up and already showed you in the last video. But I have a bodice, almost, kind of. So I've been working on the bodice. Obviously I cut everything out and I serged all of the edges. What I did was I serged everything individually. Each of the pieces were individually serged. And then, as I mentioned, I went through and I assembled the back pieces of the inner section. And I just realized that I stitched across some of the seam allowances and we'll have to undo those because the seam allowances are all tucked in there. Anyway, so I assembled all of those, and then I took the back section, the outer section, and laid it down, matched all of the edges, and pinned that all in place, and then I did all of the pleats here in the center. Now, one thing that you might notice about those pleats is that they have a slightly orangish tinge, because although I tested the pink highlighter on the white cotton Swiss dot before I used a friction pen on it, I did not test the orange pen, and the orange pen has left behind a faint orangish or yellowish tinge on all of those pleats. So that's great, not. So I'm gonna see if that will wash out. I haven't tried it yet. I'm hoping it will. Otherwise, I really hope that I can get the velvet sections out of this orange pillowcase that I have, because then at least it'll just kind of like pick up and go and it'll be fine. But yeah, I'm not very happy that it left an orangish tinge, and I feel like, thinking about it now, that may be the reason that I had stopped buying the orange ones to begin with. I bought them this time because they were significantly cheaper than the pink for some reason, but I think there was a reason I had switched to pink other than that it's prettier. Yeah. So anyway, once I had the back assembled, I turned my attention to the fronts. I put all of the darts into the fronts. I did wind up, oh, I guess I didn't serge all of the pieces separately because the front Swiss dot piece is backed with muslin. So those I flatlined together immediately, serged around the edges, and then have treated those as one since then. So those got darts in them. The bodice that's Kona cotton, those fronts got darts put in them. And then I realized that I needed the facing for the front side. So then I cut facing strips. They look like this. They're just 1 3/4 inches wide. And I cut those for the fronts, just using the fronts as like the template instead of using the pattern, since I already lengthened it and changed it and stuff. So now I have been going and putting the bodice pieces together. So I did the side seam here, and then I went to do the shoulder seam, and it dawned on me that I can't do the full shoulder seam yet because I don't know where the placket or plastron or whatever that's called comes into place. And it's gonna hit in there somewhere, and like this bit here of the Swiss dot is going to have to be finished somehow. So I did a little bit of the shoulder seam just so it would kind of like stay together and look kind of like a bodice. I did about 2 inches. That way I can still get in and finish this edge of the Swiss dot and also have room to put the plastron in there, since it will have to be, that's what I'm confused about. It's gonna have to be attached on one side, and then the other side I think is gonna have to be finished, and it will just butt up against the seam. So it'll do that sort of thing where like you have hooks and eyes here and then here, and then the collar, and then it opens up. So it's one of those funky closures of the 1890s. Funny how that works. So I will figure that out a bit later, but at least now this is all looking like a bodice. I am also putting the facings on the front. So those I've just done the seam so far, but that is going to get pressed to the inside, and the edge is going to get pressed here. And then I think I'm just going to machine stitch that in place because it's underneath. No one's going to see that. So that's just going to get pressed over kind of like that. And that's where I'm at currently, and then I get to figure out what's going on with the plastron. Though I'm actually debating about putting my hooks and eyes down the front as soon as I have the facings done and doing the plastron after that, because then I can at least see, does the bodice fit? Okay, now it's really easy to close up. I don't have to pin it every time. So I think I might do that first, even though that's kind of tedious work, and I kind of wanted like the bodice done, and now here it is Friday evening and there's one more day to work on it. So we'll see how much we'll get done through here. I really want to get like the bodice done and ideally a sleeve mock-up done, but I also am running out of time. So anyway, I'm gonna get back to work. I will see you later. So I'm just about ready to do the hooks and eyes up the center front. I think I may do them the way that it recommends in the pattern, which you see a lot in historical extents, which is where it does every other. I don't think I've ever done an edge-to-edge closure before, so you can't do every other when it's not an edge-to-edge closure. And so I think that just because this, I'm finally doing it, I think I want to do the every other as well. So basically it just means that every other on one side are hooks, every other on the other side are eyes. So it's alternates sides, and I guess it's supposed to have a better hold. It always seems hard to undo, so I feel like that's probably true. The one thing is I actually went and I put on everything, because at first I had put on the bodice and this was overlapping pretty significantly instead of meeting edge to edge, and so I decided, well, let me go ahead and see what my waist is actually like when I put on the petticoat skirt bum pad, also when I put on the corset cover, because I hadn't put that on at first. So I now have all of the proper other garments on. Oh, though it just dawned on me, I designed this bodice to be tucked in, so the skirts don't matter at all. I really think that I am going to cut off the bottom of this bodice and not do it as a tucked in version and do it with the little point in the back. I'm still weighing that. We'll see how it goes. But basically, the reason I did that was because it was overlapping too much. Now it is overlapping still a hair, like at least 1/8 of an inch, maybe 1/4 at the waist. The bust, and especially the over bust, is overlapping quite a bit. That's going to be under the plastron, so I don't know how much it matters, but I don't love that it's overlapping. The waist I can alter by changing darts or changing the side seam. Obviously, this isn't going to be altered by that, so probably should pull the facings a little bit more, even though I've already stitched them down. I don't know, I've got some stuff to play with, so I'm gonna go play with that and let you know what I did. All right, I did a sort of cheater fix, which is basically, I undid the stitching where the faces were being held back, as in right along here. I just undid it for about this much, and then I folded it under more, and I'm going to stitch that back down, but I've pinned it in place. It is now sitting where it should without any overlap, so that's good. So that means that once I do that, I can put on all of those hooks and eyes, and the bodice front part will be done. Of course, that's not everything that I've been working on. The other part that I've been working on is the plastron section. So I did fold these edges back. They're just pinned in place right now until I actually get the plastron in. But I was working yesterday on the plastron itself, trying to get everything all set on my base. So I did that base, I patterned it when I was patterning the mock-up and everything, and I cut that out of the cone of cotton. And then last night I kind of did some like rough math where I figured out that the Swiss dot section would need to be approximately 31 inches long to give me a little bit of extra just in case, and then the full width of the fabric at the top over like the bust, and then only, I think it was 25 inches wide, I want to say, down at the bottom at the point, because that is literally all that would fit on the point of the plastron base. So then I did gathering stitches at the bottom, and then 3 here in the center to try to kind of create like a puffed effect, and then up at the top pulled up all of those gathering stitches. I did mark the centers before I put the gathering stitches in, and pulled them all up and then pinned them in place. I had put lines on the base part of the plastron. I don't think you can really see them anymore because I've ironed them off, but I had drawn lines with friction pen here where those would go, kind of just a rough estimate. The first one did wind up being the exact line, but then the middle and the bottom, they were slightly off just because of I didn't want that much of a puff right here. And then because of that, I also wound up with a ton of excess down at the bottom lengthwise. So I actually ran a second set of gathering stitches a little bit higher up, which is where the bottom actually would be. So some of this has been excess. You can see here, like there's a lot of extra sticking off here. I wanted to make sure though that I'm actually happy with it before cutting that off. I did obviously already cut around the neckline because this was flat up at the top, and so then I cut down the neckline and I also cut off the excess at the bottom there. So now I just kind of have to make sure that it's right. So I am going to pin this in place because I don't want to keep wearing my corset while I'm putting on the hooks and eyes down the center, and then figure out exactly where this is hitting on the edges. I think I might actually just wind up binding the edges with bias tape. I was originally going to do these right sides together, but that is really complicated since I have all of this pinned with it not right sides together. So that's going to be my plan for this. I will show you what the plastron looks like probably once I've cut off all of this excess. So I am basically the world's slowest hand sewer, so it is quite a bit later today, but I now have all of my hooks and eyes done down the front. I guess not technically all of them. I stopped right here. I didn't do the very bottom ones because I'm still just not sure what I want to do with the bottom of the bodice, if I want it to go over the skirts or under the skirts. Right now I am not wearing the skirts, and I wanted to see how it would fit. It's still fitting quite well, so I think that I can go back to my original idea of tucking it in and doing a separate belt. That gives me a little bit more to play with, because then I can use the belt for other outfits or whatever, I guess. Use the blouse or the bodice with other outfits, who knows. So it does give me a little more versatility that way, rather than attaching the belt to the bottom of the bodice, as was done pretty frequently actually then. So anyway, those are all done. It's a little bit hard to do up that every other thing, just to let you know, but I suppose they're secure. I also did not do this one because it's going to be too close to where I need to put the collar on, I think. I'm still not positive how I want the collar to work, because in the Black Snail pattern, the collar actually attaches to the underlayer right here. So it literally just attaches right here and has an opening right there. And then the plastron just kind of goes on and like sits at the bottom of the collar. But I don't want that, because that's never really what they did as far as I can tell. Plus I want my collar opening to be in the back and then hidden by the bow, because that is generally what they did. So I want my collar to attach to the plastron and then do the whole thing where it like hits the plastron but then goes around the back more, and then the back it would sit above the neckline, I'm pretty sure. I think that's how they did them. I've looked at a lot of these. I should know this by now, but I'm pretty sure that's how they were normally done. So the issue that I'm having here right now, the plastron is just pinned in place over here, and I don't know if it's because really I'm having some weird gapping here that I don't remember having before, but yeah, I'm having weird gapping above the bust over here, and I think it's being exacerbated by the plastron being pinned on there. I'm not really positive, but I mean, it does, I think, mostly get hidden once the outer is put in there. I mean, honestly, it's gapping here too, but hopefully when I have the sleeve in, that will fix itself. I don't know. Or I'll pad. Maybe I'll put a little pad in there, smooth that out. But anyway, this right now I have just pinned to the waist, to the plastron right here. Otherwise, it's actually just laying quite smoothly over. But I think where the plastron is pinned on this side, I can just stitch that down by machine, and then this gets covered and will probably get tacked down in a couple of places, particularly at the waist, because otherwise, again, it's laying pretty well. I don't really think it's going to move off and out of the way, showing the edge of the plastron. I think that's pretty okay. This side is the side where the closure goes. So this one here, I need to figure out exactly where the edge is, I guess at some point. I do need to finish this first. I have cut a facing for it instead of doing the bias. I could do bias. I might still do bias, because this facing, so these are actually going up past where the shoulder seam is for some reason. I'm not sure how that happened, but they're going too far on both sides. And of course I cut this to this, which means this is going too far. So I might just make it easier on myself and bind it with bias tape around here, and then I would hand sew it on the inside. And once that's all bound, then I guess I can just figure out where do hooks and bars need to go over here. And then likewise, this will have hooks and bars, probably just a couple, to hold it in place here. One of the other things that I'm noticing though is that this is coming away from the base of the plastron. There's no stitch lines below here, and so it's hitting the apex of my bust, and then it's just like moving, and technical term. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know the best way to do that. I don't know if I want maybe a line of stitching. I mean, I guess it's gonna be tucked in, so maybe it won't be an issue at all. Maybe I should just wait, not do anything yet, and if I need to, I can put some tack stitches in there, because otherwise the waistband of the skirt is going to hit right here. The sash belt thing is going to hit right here. So maybe it's a non-issue. And again, this feels really long for something that's getting tucked in, so I might cut some of that off. That's a lot. I was really hoping at this point, as it is Saturday night going into Sunday at midnight, I was really hoping to have more of this done, but I don't. Such is life. So I think all of these things that I'm talking about that I need to do, like the binding, the collar, the sleeves, the finishing on the bottom, the hooks and eyes on this side, they're all gonna be, or at least hopefully all gonna be, in next week's video. So I did actually work a bit more, but I realized I screwed up. So I'm going to stop for the night / this week. But what I did was I bound the plastron, and what I realized I shouldn't have done was bind the neckline of the plastron, because that is where the collar has to connect to. I actually have to bind the neckline of the under piece instead. That's what's going to get bound, but since I haven't mocked up the collar or anything yet, that's why I'm going to stop for the night, 'cause it's 1 in the morning, so I'm going to unpick that and I'll figure out the collar next week. So I think that is me ending this video right here. I'm sorry we didn't get as far as I thought. What with rehearsals and everything going on, I just don't have as much sewing time as I have had for the past 1.5 years, what with all of the coronavirus shutdowns. So I'm super excited to be getting back into all of this theater, and these vlogs will probably be a little bit shorter for a time. I have decided, at this point at least, that I'm going to continue on with this bodice project as opposed to switching to fall and spooky stuff. The week that I'm filming this, the video on the skirt portion of this just came out, and you all told me that you are so ready for spooky stuff any time of year, and I love that because I kind of am too. And I'm super, super ready to get into my fall sewing, which I have a bunch of really awesome fall projects, but I do feel like I ought to do this bodice justice and finish it first. So that's my plan, at least at this point. We'll see if it continues, because I have 4 fall or Halloween related projects, not even including the purple plaid 1890s suit. So get excited. There's lots of fun stuff coming. Anyway, thank you all so much for joining me today. If you liked this video, please go ahead and click the thumbs up icon. And if you'd like to see more videos like this from me, please go ahead and click subscribe and the little bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video. I do post videos here on YouTube twice a week, with my sewing vlogs like this out on Tuesdays and other costuming content out on Saturdays, but I post every day over on my Instagram, so please go follow me on Instagram. That's at Lady Rebecca Fashions. And if you'd like to help support all of the work that I do on this channel, I do have a link to my Patreon and my Ko-fi down in the description below. I'd also like to give a special shout out to my Edwardian level patrons, Sharon and Angela. Thank you all so much for joining me today, and thank you again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. If you do want to get your free trial of Skillshare, go ahead and use that link down in the description below, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Happy sewing!